And then we have the large cortex that gives us our verbal and abstracting power and our ability to anticipate consequences. Vegetables don't make you happy. So whatever we experienced when we were young, both positive and negative, built the superhighways in your brain.
My dear friends, let me introduce our host. Today is Mrs. Loretta Breuning. She's got Ph.D. She is a professor of management at California State University. She is a founder of Inner Mammal Institute, but she is mostly known probably for her books, and that is The Power of Positivity and, of course, Habits of the Happy Brain. And the book which I have on my desk, it's a Russian version, and I found the book absolutely fascinating because it doesn't have only theory, it has some practical exercises which can help us to work with our head, to become happier, to have more happy hormones and less stressful ones. So today I would like Loretta to talk about what makes us different between, I mean, you were writing a lot about animals and humans. And in fact, one of the phrases which I found in your writing, you said, we have to make peace with animals, with our animal insiders, sort of us. And I think this is very important because we tend to believe that, yes, we're smart, we're much more advanced, but when it comes actually to basics, it seems to be that we're following the same patterns as mammals do. Is it so? There is really not much difference between our reaction and chemistry in our brain and animal ones?
So my work is all about self-acceptance. So I'm not making any criticism of anybody. The idea is that we have two brains. We have the brain structures that are inherited from earlier mammals, and then we have the large cortex that gives us our verbal and abstracting power and our ability to anticipate consequences. But the mammalian primal part of our brain controls the chemicals that make us feel good and make us feel bad. So you have to understand these chemical responses in order to manage them. And your verbal brain doesn't have absolute power over them. So you have to work together with your mammal brain. And when you ignore your mammal brain and you believe that your verbal brain is telling you the whole story, then you actually lose power. And so we need to get real about what our animal responses are. And the way to do that is to understand how these chemicals work in animals. And what I've learned about how they work in animals is very, very different from what people are hearing from the philosophies that are popular today.
What about these affirmations? You know, I've done a lot of work, and in fact, my last 15 years were devoted to making better of myself. So I was really reading a lot. I was associated with a lot of really big names in this positive thinking theory, with the practice of personal development. And then what you're saying is our verbal talking to ourselves, let's say affirmations, which a lot of people say are very, very important, do not really play that important role in our transformation.
Oh, very good. Yes and no. So here's the thing. Our brain relies on the neural pathways we have. We're not born with them. They're not genetic. They're built from early experience. So whatever you repeated to yourself when you were young is what wired the thought loops that you have today. Now, when you're young, you don't have control over your circumstances. So it's basically what others repeated to you and what was rewarded. So your brain learns from rewards and pain. So it's not whether your mother said, give your cookie to your brother, or your brother should give, it's what actually happened. How did you get the cookie? And your brain learns from rewards. So whatever we experienced when we were young, both positive and negative, built the superhighways in your brain. And that's what turns on good feelings and bad feelings later on. And then when you get into trouble with that for one reason or another and want to turn on different feelings, your verbal affirmations are a way to feed your brain different experiences from the automatic pilot that you built when you were young. But it's hard because neuroplasticity peaks in adolescence. So affirmations can work, but it takes a lot more repetition than you would expect. So they don't work at first because new neural pathways have trouble competing with old neural pathways.
We tend to say that you have to involve feelings. You
Yes.
have to really feel deep inside, whether it's in meditation or in affirmation. You have to experience the actual thing, which makes you shiver, for example, and then it actually creates better neuron pathways in your brain.
Yes, exactly. But in order to make this an authentic feeling, the idea is to pair your new behavior with something that feels good. So for example, just use a simple example. Let's say you have a fear of doing something, and after you do it, that you listen to comedy so that you have a good feeling after. Or like you bake a batch of cookies, so you create a positive association. So many people are, instead, they're forcing you into this pious, good for you, do that new thing and then eat vegetables. But vegetables don't make you happy. So everyone is trying to force themselves into this pious, good for you mold. But what really works for your inner mammal is do something that feels good. I'm not saying all the time, but for like 5 minutes as a reward for undertaking the new behavior that you need to learn.
So it's like animal training.
Yes, exactly.
So when we want to achieve certain behavior, we have to make the animal know that there's a treat at the end.
Exactly. And some people overdo the treats, but then other people go to the other extreme and totally deprive themselves of treats.
Right. You mentioned something. I have 2 small children, and for me it's so important. I'm angry at myself for being a bad father with my elderly children, and I thought I'm going to be great now. I'm not great now. I'm making a hell of a lot of mistakes, and I'm irritated very often. I mean, especially they are siblings, 1 year difference, and they fight between themselves, and I get bananas. So now, when I was a kid, my dad took me to singing classes. And I was trying to sing something, and the lady told me, this boy never going to sing again. It's like classical story. And can you imagine, I'm 63 now. Until recently, I thought I'm absolutely rubbish at singing. Now I started, because of pandemic thing and quarantine, I started taking singing classes. And people are saying, you are good.
Oh, good.
And so it means that you're right. I mean, something which, when we are at the early stages, when we get this message that we're rubbish and we've got nothing to compare with, then we tend to believe it. So what you suggest, how practically I can boost my girls into something, positive and make their wiring for the future better?
Great question. So first, I have the same feelings of that I did it all wrong. And I learned about the brain after my kids were already grown, because I took early retirement, and that's when I studied more, studied beyond like the automatic training that I had. And my generation, so many people in the past were very severe with children. And my generation went to the other extreme of always letting the child do whatever they want. And we were told that, they know better and whatever feels good is the right thing. And I think that's a very bad idea. And I have tremendous regrets about that. However, my husband and I, we watched this TV show made in the 1950s about parenting. It's called The Donna Reed Show. It's so good. And so there was this episode where whichever parent disciplines the child, then the children are really nice to the other parent because they hope that the other parent then will give them the reward. So both of the parents did not want to be the discipline because they saw that then the other parent got more love. So I think that's what's happening in society today. Nobody wants to give the consequences. Everybody wants to give the good guy, be the good guy that just gives the rewards, whether the child has done the behavior or not. And no one wants to give the negative consequences when you don't do the behavior. So children are not going to learn skills. So the first thing is we don't want to be excessively harsh, but if you reward bad behavior, and one example of bad behavior is also giving up without trying. If you reward bad behavior, then you're training your child to repeat bad behavior. So we have to really restrain ourselves and really negotiate with our partner to agree to not reward bad behavior. And it's very hard on a marriage. And yeah, I think that was, you know, I'm on my second marriage. So it's very hard. Now, mirror neurons is central to this. So your child learns more from what you do than what you say, just like you said.
Monkey see, monkey do. Yes.
Exactly. So for example, like you said with singing. So first, your child is learning that you take pleasure in singing, you take pride. And so every skill that you want your child to learn, you have to demonstrate it in yourself. So for example, a good example would be when you're trying to sing and you can't do it, and you try again and again, and you persist despite frustration. You break a problem down into small steps and you try and practice. And also, let's say, for example, if you're singing with a group and you have social friction in the group, and how do you resolve that friction? So that's what your child is going to learn from.
Right. So yes, so it's basically like good and bad policeman. I mean, this is something which sometimes we do, and kids immediately, you know, they have like aerials. They know whom to ask and how to play us against each other. Right. So basically, it's doing really the right thing yourself first, and talking doesn't help that much. Because there is another thing which really is like people say, do not crush your child and reward it constantly and praise constantly. And it came from American culture, because in my culture, it was not really like that. It was, I mean, if you did bad thing, or if you are poor, then you have to try harder. But the medal goes to the first one. However, now in England, where I lived for many years, I mean, there, let's say 200 people run for, you know, one mile. Everybody gets a medal. So is it right to say, well, you have to support? But I don't think it's right. I think it's wrong. It gives the wrong message, because life itself is much harder than...
I totally agree that that is the wrong thing to give everyone a medal. However, we have to say that in the past, there were many parents who were constantly negative, and no matter what you did, it was not good enough. So there's these two extremes. One is you always find fault and always criticize, and the other is you always praise. So both of them are wrong. There has to be some reality-based feedback. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to do that because parents are so wound up in their own early experience. And that's what we need to get in touch with. We have our own childhood that got wired in, and we feel our own disappointments, fears, frustrations. And sad to say, many parents are even sort of jealous and competitive, and they have their own. So we have to get honest in a quiet, private moment with our own childhood fears and sadness, and work that out in our own way instead of projecting it onto our children.
Right, because there is a famous belief that very often our unfulfilled dreams,
yes,
try to put, you know, into our child, so they have to realize them.
Yes, exactly.
So that's obviously wrong. At the same time, I remember I've heard John Maxwell, you know, leadership person, and he was saying that he's got two sons, and one son was weak physically, and another was much stronger. And then he was wrestling with this weaker son, and all this was losing to him. So that way he was building up confidence in his, weaker son. So, I mean, there are some people say that if you tough on them, then they become achievers, because they will be, they used to have overcoming, criticism, etc., etc. But then the question of achievers and happiness. I mean, I met a lot of achievers who are not happy. I mean, they did great things, they're not happy. And I would prefer to have to have happiness instead of, sort of success. And so.
Yes, exactly. So I always go back to the animal model. So animals live in a dangerous world. They can't say, I refuse to go out until the world is completely safe. So all an animal ever has is confidence in its own skills. And that's all that your child could ever have, is confidence in their own skills. So how can they have confidence in their own skills? There has to be some realism. So first they have to rely on their own skills rather than having everything done for them. And then they have to have some efficacy, some effectiveness with their own skills. So how can they have that? There has to be some realism. You can't just fake it for them. So you have to give them opportunities to test their own skills in small, safe steps. And then they have to have actual positive success rather than just faking the positive success. So how can they have that? You can't control the world. You can't just give them results, but you have to give them the confidence that you put them in the situation. And then if they fail, they go back to it. So they keep trying, but they have some choice. So they're trying in something that they've chosen that's meaningful to them. So again, some children will go to the extreme of never trying, always giving up, not wanting to try. Others will go to the other extreme of they'll just keep trying and getting frustrated and nothing is good enough. So with each child, you have to sort of mold to what they're already doing.
What they're already pre-programmed, because sometimes I have a feeling that the same kids, the same parents, and they're so different. And how come? So it's not social thing which have influenced their behavior, but something inside the DNA or.
Yes, it can be, but also it's because one child is more modeled on one parent and another child is more modeling on another parent. And also they're reacting to the other child. So my husband always mentions when he was young, his brother was very rebellious and his brother was always getting in trouble, and he always saw his brother getting in trouble. So he always tried to do the right thing because he didn't want to always be getting into trouble.
Amazing, but it's like I have a feeling that mankind is still learning the basics in everything. I mean, like there was no history before. Everything is like from scratch. To be a parent.
Yes. So this is the amazing thing, that every brain is wired from its own early experience. And this is being completely ignored in modern psychology, which I think is quite tragic. The pendulum is always swinging in psychology, and there's always new fads and new popular theories. And today, so much about early experience is being ignored because you can't do research on a baby. And in the quest for data and grant money and publications, early experience is being ignored. Also because of political correctness, which I wrote a book about, early experience is being ignored. As a result, people are not understanding their own early wiring, and therefore losing their power to redirect that wiring. So we're being indoctrinated to believe that everything is either genes or culture. But if you look in your own early experience, you say, oh, I see, I'm just repeating this experience and that experience. And one easy way to discover this is to interview your friends. If they'll tell you, or strangers, find out about their early life. And you say, wow, they're just repeating their early experience. And then when you see that, you realize it's not the world, it's me. And then I can redirect myself by building new circuits.
Mhm. Yes, but that requires very strong conscious effort. And it seems to be like it's still like correcting in a way, instead of doing it right, from the one it's tabula rasa, from the first thing, then you have to have an experience, negative or positive, and then you have to analyze it and then get out of it through whatever therapies.
Well, this idea that there has to be some perfect childhood so that we can all be optimized in every minute. This is, the technocrat worldview, the social engineering worldview. I think it's wrong. I think it's unhelpful. And it's disempowering because it trains people to say, oh, it's not my fault. It's, society's fault or my parents' fault. But instead to say, there is no perfect. We all get shaped by a random collection of early experiences, but we all have the power to build new pathways. And it starts with accepting what we have now and then celebrating our power to take that next step to build those new connections between new neurons. And the way I always say is, we have billions of extra neurons just sitting there waiting for us to connect them into new pathways.
Right. I think it's interesting because very often we really feel that we have to put as many things in our child. But I found that during this quarantine, my children became more children because there was no school, and then they were playing more and they came back to old cartoons. And it was like really, and I think they were catching up, being children, because they were removed, from pressure of competing at school and, these different extracurricular activities, etc., etc. So I found this kind of useful and blessing.
Oh, good. Well, it will be interesting to build on that because, of course, you don't want your children to just watch cartoons and repeat the bad behavior of the cartoons, or to continue the passivity of watching cartoons. So you have to find, again, between the verbal brain and the mammal brain, to say to your child, so what did we learn from sitting on the couch for 2 months or whatever they did, and then to verbalize what is the positive skill that we can bring into the future from that and build onto that.
Right. Well, it's interesting because I've took a lot of garbage from my garage, like old tires, and they were creatively building up, things
Exactly.
like that to amuse themselves, and that was I found very, very useful. It's
Exactly.
I didn't want to talk about children that much, but because it's so close to my heart now, so
Yeah.
But Loretta, can you, Steve, briefly give us a description of these hormones of happiness? Because and I would like to talk about one particular one, which I think is very relevant to the current situation. So if you give us some idea what dopamine is, what serotonin is, etc. So I would appreciate that.
Sure. Okay. So in my work, I focus on 4, I call the happy chemicals: dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and endorphin. Each of these has artificial equivalents that maybe people look for the fast, easy way to get them artificially. But when you know what they do in animals, you say, oh my gosh, that's exactly how life works. So in the animal world, these happy chemicals are not on all the time. They evolve to do a specific job. They turn on in the specific moment when that chemical can motivate a survival behavior, and then they turn off. So you always have to do more to get more, and that's why life is frustrating, and that's why we all have this treadmill feeling, and we want to do more to get more, because that's what kept our ancestors alive in a world of constant hunger and threat. So dopamine is the basic one. It's the good feeling that you're about to meet a need. So needs are defined from past experience. So in a world of hunger, you had to constantly look for food. When you saw food in the distance, you got excited and you said, wow, that's going to make me feel good. And you ran toward it. And today, when you have a full belly, it takes other things to turn on that feeling of excitement and say, wow, that's going to make me feel good, and invest your energy in moving toward it. So the very simplistic example is if a person decides that they want to train for a marathon, and they think that finishing a marathon will make them feel good, and that expectation of a reward motivates them to train for the marathon, because you can't finish it unless you train. So each day when you take a step toward whatever goal you've set for yourself, you get a little bit of dopamine, and that motivates you to keep stepping toward it in a way that a monkey keeps climbing toward food. So oxytocin, I'm going to just have some water.
Okay.
So oxytocin is a chemical that we're hearing a lot about today because it's often called the bonding hormone or even the love chemical. And like all of these, they've been romanticized in the popular press. But to look at it from an animal perspective, it creates herd behavior in animals. It creates the urge for safety in numbers. And it's actually the good feeling that you can let down your guard and feel safe because you have social support. And this is what motivates us to find social support in order to feel safe. But the truth is that animals have a lot of conflict within their groups. So they'd really rather go off by themselves to find food. But there are always predators. So the more predators there are, the more animals seek safety in numbers. And oxytocin rewards an animal that you feel good when you're in a group, and that's what keeps the animal from going off on its own where it would be eaten. So our ancestors, if they got frustrated with their tribe and went off on their own and got eaten, then we wouldn't be here today. So we are descended from people who stuck with the group because oxytocin made it feel good. Simple answer. Now, and that's why, you know, people are always looking for social bonding today, despite the reality that we all know that when you're in a group, they get on your nerves. So we have that push and pull. We want both. We don't want to be isolated, and yet when we're with people, they get on our nerves. So that is natural. Nothing is wrong with you. Nothing is wrong with society. This is how mammals are. Now, the next one is serotonin. And
let me interrupt you here. For example, it means that giving up your personality at a certain extent, right? If you're part of the group, then you should behave as everybody else. And then that's my question. I mean, this coronavirus, if you don't mind, I mean, this fear of being dead and getting the disease. I mean, if people who didn't show that fear, they were looked at like hippie, you know, in the 60s, and something like, you know, what is it? Is
yes.
it the right observation?
Well, in the United States now, unfortunately, they're called right-wing fascists if they don't believe in the disease. Unfortunately, very sad outcome. And they are being blamed. So all the people who are fearful of the disease think that they're making a great sacrifice by staying home, and you are being a selfish person who's endangering everyone else by not having the fear. So there's a lot of different factors at a lot of different levels. So one is that when you said giving up your personality and conforming to the fears of others is all through human history. That has been the way that groups stayed together, because that's what keeps a group of animals together, is the fear of predators. So leaders have always used fear of a common enemy to
unite
keep you in. Yes, exactly. And other people in the group have learned that. Now, separately though, you mentioned you have to lose your personality. Well, that depends on, do you really feel the fear or not? So a lot of my books are about how to not share in other people's fears, because people will always have negative feelings. So if you feel obligated to share in the negativity of others, then you will never be happy. And no one in human history would ever have been happy if it was wrong to ever be happy as long as there was one other person who was unhappy. So this whole indoctrination that you must merge with other people's unhappiness, this is a belief system, and I question it. I was forced to learn that belief system when I was young, and I didn't question it until I was in my 50s, and I thought, like you probably, time is running out. If I don't start being happy soon, it's going to be too late. So you have to then question all of that unhappy programming and make the individual conscious choice to reprogram yourself, despite the fact that other people have not made that choice and may never do that.
Yeah, thank you. So the third one,
so the third one is serotonin. So this is very complicated because in the animal world, it's easy to see that animals get pleasure from being in the position of power, in the position of strength, in the one-up position. And serotonin is the chemical that rewards an animal for asserting itself. It's not aggression, but it's actually a calm feeling, because when the animal sees that it's stronger, instead of being aggressive, it calms itself, and therefore it doesn't bully the weaker individuals, because it knows that it can dominate them, and they have already submitted, and the stronger animal takes the resources, and it's calm because it knows it's going to get the resources, and may even share the resources, may even prevent conflict and keep peace between others, but it's based on dominance. So this feeling can be very socially disruptive. And so on the one hand, if you try to dominate everyone, there's some bad consequences. But if you never try to assert yourself, then you'll never have serotonin and you'll feel depressed. So what is the safe way to get it? It's very difficult. It's very challenging, and it's been the struggle of human history. And there's no simple guaranteed way to have it every minute. And so this is basically the underlying theme of all my books, is to find safe ways of getting that, despite the social programming that tells you things like today. What they're telling you is that there is no such thing, and capitalism causes this, and you should not feel good about your own power, and you should just feel good about helping others.
It's interesting. So, and you can get this this chemical through, let's say, being good at sport, for example, right? So there is, it's, or being more, I don't know, resilient, or maybe have, stronger, whatever, compared to other people. So that already gets you this serotonin.
Well, the thing is, you can be good at it by taking pride in anything you do, such as singing. So that was a perfect example of not just singing, but improving in your singing and improving over your past singing, which was very significant for you because of your early wiring. So that's what everyone can do, is to conquer what they felt like was their past limitations, and to take pride in their creativity. But what I mentioned before, helping others is the only way that we hear today. And you can also do it by helping others. But I always caution about that, because many people have been indoctrinated to say, I'm never allowed to do anything for myself. I'm only going to help others and then expect others to help me in return. And that's really an implied bargain. And then other people always fail to meet their bargain. And then they end up resentful and bitter and angry. So you have to take responsibility for your own feelings instead of having these implied bargains.
Right. Well, that's true. So you compare yourself really to your old self, and then feel good about it. In most of the
Yes.
really feel,
Yes. And if you are trying to feel good by being a rescuer, have to feel honest with yourself. You have to be honest with yourself about that. So many people today are rushing into that rescue mindset. And again, they're not being honest about it. What it is moral superiority. And all through human history, people have sought the one-up feeling and stimulated their serotonin by seeking moral superiority. And because they're so convinced of their own moral superiority, they don't see the implied negativity that they have toward everyone else. And I became very aware of this when I was doing yoga for 10 years. And people who do yoga are very persuaded of their own spirituality, and they think they're being very positive, but then they're very negative about everyone who doesn't have that. So it's very much of a moral superiority.
It's like being vegetarian in the company of meat eaters. So, I mean, if you mention that, then you feel like you feel silly, actually, because you feel that you're more superior, but you're not. I mean,
Yes, exactly. So we have to tread very lightly on other people's one-up feelings because it's so core to the animal brain, yet no one will admit it. So that gives your animal brain like more power because your verbal brain is pretending that it's not happening.
Right. And the fourth one, which is, it's not really happiness, but I think we're talking about endorphin, right? Endorphin.
Yes, endorphin.
Endorphin.
Endorphin is based on endogenous morphine. So it's the body's natural opioid. And in the animal world, it's only triggered by pain. Real physical pain triggers endorphin. And the job of endorphin is to mask pain with a euphoric feeling. And in the human world, we love that euphoric feeling so much that we want it. But to have to create pain in order to stimulate it is a harmful thing, because then you have to create more and more pain to stimulate it, which is a really bad thing. And that's why I'm very cautious about many people talk about runner's high as a way to stimulate it, but I know many exercise addicts who push themselves to exercise to the point of pain in order to get high. So I always emphasize that our brain evolved to seek dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin, but not to seek endorphin. It's just there for emergency. And no amount of endorphin high is going to make up for the dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin that you really need.
Because interesting, on my show, I have a lady who is a mountain climber, and she conquered Everest, and she is preparing for K2. It's something really very, very
exactly.
dangerous. And she said she cannot live now without going to the mountains, and it's so hard. I mean, when she talks about that, it's really such a stress on your whole body, on your mental, etc. And another guy, he's a diver, and he said I cannot, and he wants to go deeper and deeper and deeper. He's now in 63. He wants to do 90. Very good guy, very nice, charming, but that's his really. And I think there is something related to that hormone, probably.
Exactly. So here's the thing. Let me use my own examples, a little more everyday life. So once I write a book, then I just want to write another book. So why do we all repeat ourselves? So writing another book and another book, I mean, it may sound good, but it's not really, because it's too much sitting. So it's not good for my circulation. So why do we all repeat ourselves? Because our brain is designed to seek rewards, and it expects to get rewards in the way we got them before. So if you got rewards in that particular way, it's hard for your brain to get excited about something else. So I have to really work to say, well, what else can I get excited about? And you don't get excited until you actually expect the reward and see yourself approaching it. So that's why a 1 8-year-old child says, I'm going to be a doctor. And they love to study because they see themselves getting closer, and they actually expect something great to happen when they're a doctor. So that's what we have to do, is to train ourselves to embrace new rewards, new goals that we can feel positive about, and to have a few goals so that if one goal is blocked, we can move toward another one. So every day we're moving toward one goal or another. And the other funny example I use, I love to go in a hot tub. Okay, so why would it feel good to be in a hot tub? Is because there's some pain because it's hot. But after you're in the hot tub for a few minutes, you don't feel it so much. But if you had to make it hotter and hotter and hotter, that would be terrible. So this is the treadmill aspect of our brain. It's called habituation. And that's why people who take pills, the pills don't work after a while. Whether it's legal pills or illegal pills. So habituation is natural. And that's why we need more stimulation. And we're all challenged to manage that urge.
Interesting. So really, I have so many questions to ask you. And let's mention the one which is not considered to be happy hormone, but at the same time, I think it's essential for survival, as well as these four which you mentioned. They are not meant to make us happy, right? In animals, they meant to help them to survive the hostile environment. Is it the same with us?
Yes, it's the same, because we have inherited brain structures that are not designed to turn them on all the time, but are designed to release them when you expect a reward. Now, we train our children to expect rewards in healthy ways. For example, if you choose between studying for a test or going to a party, you can wire a child to expect that studying for a test is going to feel good in the long run. So that's the challenge of having this big human brain on top of an animal brain. But you were talking, I think, about the threat chemical cortisol, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So cortisol is the chemical that tells an animal that its survival is threatened. So whether an animal is hungry or smelling a predator, cortisol creates a full body sense of alarm that says you have to do something right away or you're going to die. So in the human world, we call it the stress chemical, and current psychology trains people to blame society for its stress. But I think it's important to understand how it works in animals and how it worked in your unique individual past, to take responsibility for the way you have wired yourself to feel threatened, and that's what's turning it on in you today.
And it's threatened, like it's not survival as such, but it's like losing your job, for example, or etc. So I think the brain really feels that it's like it's going to die. I mean, people are making sometimes, how do you call mountains out of them molehill. I mean, it's this type of thing.
Yes, but here's the link between, nobody is consciously thinking, oh, if I lose my job, I'm going to get eaten by a predator. But here's how it works. When you're a young child, you cannot meet your own survival needs. So you depend on your parents. And on some deep level, we very much want the acceptance and approval of our parents in order to feel safe. So whenever you get the rejection of your parents, you feel threatened, and yet you need to learn to feel safe despite the fact that your parents have to say no sometimes. In addition, then, when you're a child, sometimes you're not accepted by other children. Maybe they will laugh at you, and you still have to learn to feel safe anyway. So this is, again, that human brain wiring itself with the animal brain underneath, and how can we train ourselves to meet our needs in safe ways in a social group.
And that's we coming to something which I found fascinating in your work. It's this 45 days plan, how to change your brain, how to change neural pathways. And I can tell you now openly that I tried several times, but condition was that if you miss a day, then you have to go back to the day one. And I tried, I think, 5 times and I failed. I promise that I'm going to start again from, as soon as we finish. I will fill the questionnaire. Tell us more about it, how effective it is. And have you met people who said to you that, yes, I've done it. Thank you. Thank you very much for that.
Yes, people do write to me and say, yes, thank you, I've done it. But you may have done it too, in the sense that even if you haven't done 45 days, I don't know, do you have a sense that you have rewired yourself? That
even asking the right questions, that what I found good, that when you ask yourself questions, you start thinking, and that helps a lot, because it takes the pressure. It's like, for me, it's putting into this scientific perspective, sort of, so I can understand myself and my chemistry more.
Yes, so here's the program. So first, the idea is you start with self-acceptance. So I'm never telling people, oh, you're bad, you have to change. The idea is I have some wiring built from my past, and it is creating behaviors. And if I don't like one of those behaviors, I'm only going to tackle one at a time. And I'm going to design a new behavior to replace it with, of my own free choice. I'm not just trying to please someone else, but I'm saying, what new behavior would I like to have? And a common example would be that when I'm upset, I would like the skill of calming myself by doing X. And the first time I do X, it's not going to feel good. But if I plan and prepare this behavior every day, once a day, I'm going to find a moment when I'm upset to do X in a planned way. And although it won't feel good at first, I know that if I repeat it for 45 days, it will start to feel natural and normal and safe, because my old response to stress is just an accident of my past experience. It's just an old pathway. And if I build a new pathway, then the new behavior will start to feel natural, because neurons will connect and my electricity will flow there. Now, if you don't do the whole 45 days, the idea is really that one day you tell yourself, oh, today was a hard day, I don't really have to do it today. Then you're building up the pathway that says, I don't really have to do it. So that's the idea, is you need to resist, because that old pathway is so big. Also, if you tell yourself, oh, I don't really have to do it today because I already get it. So you know that many people, when they think they already get it, but as soon as they're tired, they go back to the old way. So my books explain why the old pathway is so strong and why it's hard to build a new one. And the simple example is the difference between speaking your native language or learning a new language in adulthood. Everyone knows that it's possible to learn a new language in adulthood, but very few people do it because it takes so much repetition, whereas your native language was learned so effortlessly that you don't even remember the effort of learning it. So that's what it takes to rewire new emotional responses.
So you have to have tenacity, repetition, and I think you have to have really clear rewards. Why
Exactly.
do you do that?
Exactly.
For example, I'm easily irritated. Well, at least that's my perception of myself, and I would like to get rid of that. And for me, it was like doing some sport and heavy, something which, I become calmer. But that's something which I would like to change in myself, and I have to.
Yes. I have a really good one for that, because I was the same way. And it's important for people to know, once somebody gets on your nerves, your brain releases cortisol, and that cortisol stays in your body for about an hour. And during that hour, you feel bad. Even when you have positive thoughts, you keep feeling bad. And cortisol's job is to tell you to look for threats, because when a gazelle smells a predator, it has to say, where is the predator? in order to save itself. So you're looking for threats. So I would say, even if I'm thinking positive, I'm still feeling irritated. So that's when I had to really retrain myself. So the first thing is that when somebody is irritating you, it's because you feel like they have power over you. Mm-hmm. So you have to change your thoughts and to say, they don't have power over me. And the way to think that, I found, is to imagine that I have many paths in front of me, and that person is blocking one of my paths, but I have many alternatives. So that I don't imagine this person has the power to control my life. Mm-hmm. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is exactly what you said, is if you do a sport or any other activity that you enjoy for 20 minutes to 40 minutes, because in that time, your body will eliminate most of the cortisol. Otherwise, no matter what you think with your head, you're still going to feel bad, because cortisol is a real physical chemical in your body.
Right. And I found that physical pain, for example, if you get some pain during your sporting activities like martial art, you get hit, this is important, this hurts. And the sort of even our psychological pain doesn't seem to be so relevant at that point in time. And you can, dismiss it in a way. So.
Yes, exactly. And I was just reading a book written really not very long ago in the 1940s. These people had no access to dentists, and their teeth were in constant pain. And they had infections that never healed, and they were in constant pain. And that's so important to understand, that because our lives are so safe today is why people obsess over, like, my boyfriend doesn't love me anymore. And that feels like life and death, because they have this huge threat system that nature created and no real threats. So they're activating the whole threat system of our ancestors' suffering. Mm-hmm. So it's really important to build the skill of understanding our threat system and managing it, instead of this social indoctrination we have now, which is telling you that society is bad and we're all feeling bad because society is bad, and the only way to feel good is to fight society. I think it's very unhealthy.
Right. Well, you're absolutely right. And a lot of all the cartoons, everything follows to tell us that love is the ultimate thing, being happy all the time. So not only, during the short burst of, when you overcome something, etc., but it must be inner all the time presence in your head. And according to your theory and your findings, it cannot be done. You cannot have ongoing, happiness. It's not right. Oh.
And by understanding what it takes to, I'm just going to repeat my sentence because I have a message. It's a skill. You don't have effortless happiness, but you can build the skill of understanding what stimulates your happy chemicals, and then direct yourself in a way toward it. And you can be happy with small bursts of happy chemicals instead of expecting this big thing.
Right. Yeah, that's very good advice. Obviously, it's so easy to say and it's so hard to do. Have you tried? Of course, you do, and you did on yourself. I mean, have you tried, make yourself as a object of your research?
Well, that's how I started it all. When as I mentioned, I heard this thing that when you turn 50, like, your body starts to wear out. So all of your Band-Aid strategies that didn't really fix your past suffering, then they start to wear you out. So I got more honest about the suffering circuits that I had, and I made more of an effort to rewire them myself. However, I have to say that during this quarantine, like everyone else, now I'm challenged to build new solutions. So my current challenge, so my personal addiction was travel. So I always loved to travel, and somehow, and I also actually, I like to work, I like to write, but I always liked to work and write with the sense that I had a great trip coming up, and now I have no trip coming up. And I know that when I was 16 years old, and we have like high neuroplasticity at that point, so that's when my brain was shaped. And when I was 16 years old, I had a lot of challenges in my life. And that's when I got the addiction of traveling. And I planned 2 years ahead that I would go to Europe and that I would earn the money to go to Europe. And that became like the whole focus of my life and helped me ignore other stresses. And now, without a trip to look forward to, and so first I was focused on just writing a book. And then I heard that my publisher might go out of business. So then I stopped having that to look forward to. So I'm really challenged to have new goals to look forward to, and just noticing how many times a day I think, I wish I had a trip. It's just like an addict, or thinking, I wish I had a cigarette, I wish I had a pill, I wish I had a vodka, whatever, so it's made me aware of my programming, and I'm still looking for the solution. I'm still looking for a place to travel to.
Oh, really? Some people turn into the local thing. I mean, they're discovering, their surroundings, because very often we neglect, we travel miles and miles to see something which local people there do not care about. But they're, it's like to know your,
yes.
your state, your city, and I think it's, something which can be, at least for a time being, supplement and substitute,
Yes, it's very good. But I have actually done a lot of travel in my local area, partly because I moved to California from New York in the middle of my life, and I was in love with California in the beginning, so I did everything maybe with tourist eyes. And then after I completely did California, then I even went back to New York with tourist eyes. So I've really done so much travel. I tell people that I'm so old that everything in my bucket list is already done. So I have to add new things to my bucket list.
It's interesting what you said about traveling, because I was, brought up and I was born in the Soviet Union, totalitarian state, where trip to neighboring Czechoslovakia was considered to be like, something like around the earth. And now I've been working only in 30 countries worldwide. So it's my desire, the same as you. I'd like to, travel. I'd like long distance, short distance, and I feel very comfortable, on the plane. No telephone, just books, and so. Right.
Yes. So ironically, so at this point, I want to travel so much that I'm not even worried about the disease, but everybody else is still worried about the disease. So it still limits opportunity, and that gives me a way to just build new circuits, to be comfortable about not being on the same page as everybody else. So I guess I would say that that's my new goal and my new sense of accomplishing something.
So new challenge. Loretta, I already took a lot of your time. What final advice you would give people? What do you think the most important thing to remember and to do?
I always mention, if it hasn't already come up, is about social comparison. So we have inherited a brain that is constantly comparing ourselves to others, because that's how an animal knows when can I reach for the food and when is it not safe to reach for the food. So you are always comparing yourself to others, but you're not admitting it, because instead of knowing that you are doing it, you accuse other people of judging you when you are also judging them. So as soon as you notice that you are doing judging, then you have power over it. And you could just give yourself an A if you want, or you could just stop keeping score, stop finding fault with other people, stop finding fault with yourself, and just admit that you are an animal and you're not going to live forever, and you might as well feel good.
Yeah, they say being vulnerable to other people helps, they say. So it's like you remove the guards, you're saying, hey, yeah, I'm no better than you. So yeah.
I'm no better than you, but you're no better than me either.
That's right. Yeah, that's very true. Thank you very much, dear Loretta. It's a pleasure being with you and talking to you. And I hope I'm sure you're writing something. Can you tell us just
Yeah. So I have a new book called Status Games. Status Games: Why We Play and How to Stop. And it's expected out in the middle of 2021. And it's very challenging, because I would like to say that there's a simple solution, but there's not a simple solution. But I hope I think it's the most important problem that everyone has, is that they care about status, but they can't admit it, and they can't have the one-up position every minute, but they want it. And also, I just want to add, when the whole quarantine first started, I had been invited to speak in Moscow, and I very much wanted to go, but I did not think I should be in a room with 5,000 people shaking hands for hours a day. So this was before it was a problem in Russia. So then I said, I don't think I should go. And I hated to do that. So then they said, well, we'll postpone it until August. And I said, well, I'm not sure it's going to be better by August. So now I'm like on the other side. Like now it's like I'm willing to go, but I don't know. I don't think.
You know that there is it's going to be a forum online called Brain. If you want, I can explore. I mean, it's because that for you it would be, I think, wonderful. At least, feeling that you will be addressing big audience. Because to be honest, I don't think that until the end of this year there will be any massive events.
Exactly. Yeah.
Naive to think. I mean, it doesn't look that way. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So we will talk
exactly.
About
yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Please do.
I'll write to you. It might be today, even later today.
Okay. Great. And someday I'll go to Ukraine. I haven't been there.
It's like, I would love to. It's the similar cultures. It's just silly politics which destroy relationship. People are, the same. Good people and bastards. So it's like,
yes. Exactly. Great to talk to you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.